So why don't we pursue our own ideas more in terms of like creativity? I think there's a list of reasons why we don't go after our own design ideas. Number one, I think we're too hung up on the execution piece. Number two, it's hard to find resources to learn design. Number three, fear of failure and our egos. That's a huge piece. We don't want to feel like we've failed. And new design and trying ideas is brutal on the ego because you're going to fail. Things are going to look stupid sometimes. So I would encourage everyone to try and shed the fear of failure and just try, new designs. Every project I try, there's always the possibility of not liking something, and that's okay. You just pivot and redesign. Sometimes it takes multiple redesigns and you feel a little dumb. You're like, why? Even after all these years, why? But that's okay because everyone's dealing with that. My name's Paul Jasper. I'm the artist behind Copper Pig Woodworking. I'm a scientist by day, woodworker by night, and I live here in Boston. So Boston's a great place to live, especially for scientists, because it is one of the largest pharmaceutical hubs in the whole world. I couldn't ask for a better place. Boston, to me, is one of the greatest American cities you can live in. I came here for undergrad, and I came back here for postdoctoral work, and I just can't imagine living anywhere else. Every day, my family and I have a little coffee time in the morning. It gives us an opportunity to catch up, relax, appreciate what the day has in store for us. Makes you feel human again to get off the devices and to just sit together. I am a scientist full-time, which means I'm doing, I'm working as a scientist from, the time I get up till about 5 p.m. And after which I'm lucky enough to work from home, so I can just come into the shop as need be. Even like throughout the day, if I get a small break, I can just come out here, check on something, and go back in. After work, I typically eat with the family, and then nighttime is allocated for woodworking. So for many years, I made furniture. For about 10 years, I was trying to learn how to do the execution, the how of woodworking. And then about 7 or 8 years ago, after a decade of that, I started Copper Pig Woodworking, and the whole premise behind it was to explore original design. Stop thinking about how to make things and think more about what it is I really want to focus on and really want to make. I recall a basketball coach. Now, I didn't play basketball much at all in my life, but I do remember a particular coach saying to me, you need a lot of touches if you're going to get good at something. And so I sort of thought about that with Copper Pig, and I said, I need a lot of repetition. So I make primarily smalls, and that comes in the form of jewelry boxes, tea boxes, keepsake boxes, mostly boxes, although I'm not averse to trying other forms. It's just boxes are these perfect little canvases to try out a lot of artistic and creative ideas. Sometimes we're lucky enough to realize in retrospect we had what was a very lucky event in getting into woodworking. So when I bought my house in the early 2000s, there was an 80-year-old man across the street. His name was Hal. Hal never had any sons. He had 2 daughters who weren't particularly interested in woodworking, and Hal was an electrical engineer who had this passion for woodworking. So his whole basement was a wood shop. And this thing was packed from top to bottom. You'd walk through these tiny little aisles, and you felt it coming in. It was all wood and machines. And he took me down there, and I was walking around, and it was like a magical place. Like I had never imagined a wood shop look like this. I thought, what is this place? This is so interesting. Like, this is amazing, Hal. What are you doing? And mind you, I was like 30 at the time, and Hal was 80. And despite that 50-year age gap, we became like instant friends. And so I would check on him. We would do little things together. And, I think he saw the wonder and the awe in my eyes about his wood shop. And he said, do you want to make something? And I was like, hell yeah, I want to make something. Let's do this. And so I came home from work the next day, and Hal had drafted a stool on a piece of graph paper. And he held it up and he's like, we're going to make this, because this is going to show you all the tools in the shop and what they do and why we need them. And I thought, this is great. And so we made the stool together, and that really was the genesis of my interest in woodworking. This is where it all began. This is the stool that Hal drafted on that piece of graph paper and that I came home from work to see. And this is my first legit woodworking project. And it is rife with mistakes and tear out and problems, and I love it. It's just a great reminder of his generosity and where we all start as woodworkers. And sure enough, it holds up great. It's been almost 20 years now. We love it. It's like a family heirloom. And then I went as far as I could on my own. I was doing online video, and I was reading as much as I could, but I realized I was hitting a wall. And then I said to myself, why am I not taking classes? This is stupid. I have one of the finest furniture schools in the world in Boston, the North Bennett Street School, as well as Phil Lowe's, the Furniture Institute of Massachusetts in Beverly. Why am I not taking classes here? And so I decided to take a class. And that class changed everything. It was called the Fundamentals of Fine Woodworking. And it really took me from being a self-taught machine woodworker into the hand tool realm, which was honestly paradigm shifting. It changed everything. It changed my life. So after I took a few classes in hand tool use, I was permanently changed. And I just happened to meet my friend Freddy Roman, who was selling some equipment. And he was part of the fine furniture scene in Boston. And becoming friends with him on that chance encounter, just buying some equipment, he further integrated me into knowing all the people, showing me, a lot about what machines are, really good and what hand tools are good. He really kind of just set the tone for me back then. And I really appreciate, him, kind of taking me into the fine furniture scene. And so that, was the trajectory, from Hal to classes, to online, to classes, to getting to know people deeply in the local furniture realm. And from there, things took off. This is a William and Mary high chest. This form was popular around the early 1700s. It always just appealed to me. I would see them at museums and I thought, I love that form. It just looks so good to me, and I don't even know why. So as part of my convincing myself that I was good enough to make things, I thought, you know what, I'm going to try to make an ambitious period piece. And this was that piece. It took me about 300 or 400 hours. I love it. I think it's beautiful. Not because it's my work, I just think it's a beautiful form. And the curly maple that I bought for this came out of a single tree. I bought an entire tree, which I had never done before. Felt kind of odd. It's got all original period brasses cast in England. And it has, of course, hidden compartments. I'm not going to show you all of them, but I will show you these, which reside underneath. This is where you keep all your valuables, and that's why mine's empty. I don't own anything valuable. But no, it's done, right as rain. All the drawers, they're dovetailed. There's some decorative inlays. It just was a great way to explore period furniture, all hand done. I left all the plane marks. So I started Copper Pig in reaction to an existential crisis I had. And that existential crisis was where I had convinced myself that I have the execution skills to make what it is I want to make. And the question is, well, what do you want to make? Who are you as an artist? Why do you always copy designs of the past, famous furniture forms? Who are you? What do you want your artistic contribution to be? And that really stopped me in my tracks. I was really messed up for a while by that question, because I thought it was all about execution, and then suddenly it's like, I'm lost. I don't know who I am as an artist. I had never taken the time to explore that question. So that's what Copper Pig is. It was my rebranding to try and explore and figure out who I am. And so I started with very, very small items that would allow me to try a lot of ideas very quickly. And that quickly grew into patterns, flowers, plaids, Japanese patterns, and that still persists in my work today. I've tried so many different techniques because learning and curiosity to me is really at the heart of what drives like the passion for creating. So I'm so curious about so many types of woodworking and so many techniques. I want to try them all to see which I like, which are hard, which look good, what will enable me to have the most wide artistic palette. I don't want to be limited by techniques. I want to be limited by my own imagination. So what accompanied though this piece is after I finished it, that's when I had my existential crisis that I was telling you about. I had convinced myself by finishing this piece that I was capable of making what it is I want to make. Whether it's, I turned the legs, and believe me, it was a disaster. It took like 3 hours per leg. So I still wasn't really where I wanted to be. I would have loved to knock these out in a single pass, flawless, but at least I could make the things I wanted to make by and large. Now, the existential crisis then became, well, what is it you want to make? I copied, a design from the past for this, and I love it. It's one of my favorite pieces ever. But this signified the change from me as the person who executes to trying to figure out who I am as an artist and designer. And this piece is like a constant reminder of that shift in my life. I had so many people telling me, you definitely have a style. I see a picture on Instagram and I know it's you. That was hard for me to come to terms, because I said, really? Everything's so crazy different. But apparently I do have a style. And I'm starting to realize what it is. I can't put my finger on it, but I tend to use highly figured woods because I think they're beautiful. It's like nature's way of painting the project. It's allowing nature to have a say in the piece. So it's almost always a highly figured, beautiful wood. It frequently involves mixed materials like metals. So I often integrate brass, copper. I think the interplay of wood and metal is beautiful. And not just that, there's other materials that I just haven't found a way to integrate yet, whether it's fiber, fabric, glass. I think these are all completely underexplored areas of woodworking. They tend to have an artistic component to them with drawing or some kind of handwritten element. So for example, it could take the form of an inlay, or it could be pyrography. A lot of woodworking to me looks like blank canvases. Like you would think the piece is finished. Like let's say it's a plain box and you say, oh, this is finished. But to me, it looks like a blank canvas. Like that's the canvas to start some of the design. Now, this has to be in balance, because if the wood is so beautiful and highly figured, putting pyrography all over it is not going to be doing you any design favors. So there is a point about discipline. When does the piece need more, and when do you have to just let it speak on its own? I think that comes with time and experience. So this piece represents sort of the new me, which is a bit of the old me with a bit of the new design. So this is also a William and Mary piece. So again, thinking early 1700s. It is based off a valuables cabinet made by the shop of Symonds, Symonds, in Salem, Massachusetts. So this form is just after the Pilgrim period of furniture, which means ornamentation is going to be a little bit on the crude side. So it's like octagons, cut moldings, a little dental work here, but of course split turnings, because all they had at the time was turners. They didn't have the really high level carvers and artisans from Europe yet, but they could turn. So they would turn these, split the turning down the center, and apply it as a decoration. So this is stereotypical early Pilgrim, William and Mary style. Now, what is different about this is the fact that, I reimagined it. So they did not have a skull here in the original. They would put the owner's initials and the date usually. This skull came from my amazing collaborator, Elena. who lives in Russia, and she is a world-class marquetry expert. And her and I thought it would be absolutely bitchin' to put a skull on this cabinet. Now, when you open this cabinet, which this will be hinged on a door, again, you get the compartments. Now, again, this is a departure from the classic. The classic form had very pedestrian-looking drawers, and that was sort of leaving me flat. So what I did is I made it a much more high-end looking interior with sort of double beaded fretwork in between, but I also veneered the drawer fronts in ammonia fumed curly eucalyptus, which is totally like not period appropriate. But that then pairs with period appropriate things, which is these are hand carved, and the patterns come from original Elizabethan plates from 14th century England. So it's a bit of old done the way it was done by hand, mixed with a bit of the new. And of course, you can't have any valuables cabinet without things such as hand-cut dovetails and, of course, secret compartments. So that's one of the secret compartments. Another one is if you reach your hand back and you can grab in here and you pull out another little hidden box that you can put your oh, look at that! Derek from Malden was here. Son of a bitch. He left that as a surprise. There's one more hidden compartment in this cabinet, which I think might be the coolest one. If you take out these drawers and you say, geez, where's the hidden compartment there? If you look in the back, but you can take the entire divider system out, and that is itself a hidden compartment. So I know it's going to be a very unusual piece. There's no buyer. I made it just because I thought the piece needed to exist in the world. And it may be hard to find a buyer who wants like a 1700s inspired valuables box with a skull on the front, but I think it's cool. There's a lid for every pot. Well, a lot of people think that CNC is not real woodworking, but there's sort of this purist mentality of like traditional woodworkers that it's like traditional or you're like a technology person. But honestly, the answer is both. It doesn't have to be one or the other. It's an and, not an either or. I never understood people forming camps. The CNC, I never thought I would use it as much as I do. I use it on almost every project, which is surprising to me. So this is the first time we're actually cutting the inlays on our chopsticks using the CNC. We've always done it just with a handheld Dremel and like guides, but I thought, why don't we try to use the CNC to route the inlay slot? So here we are, giving it our maiden voyage.
He loves the shop. He loves making things. Even if it's not the shop, I feel like he's always trying to make something. That's like his brand. Making chopsticks, yeah, because that's what I do. That's basically the only thing I do. I used to do other stuff.
You used to make serving boards.
I used to make serving boards.
Why are you making chopsticks? What are you going to do with all that cash?
I need money for gas, honestly.
I think it's important for us to not get edgy at each other as we work together. Now, Ruby and I have a wonderful relationship. We're actually very, very close. But, you know, I have a certain idea of how things should be done. She has a certain idea of how things, and we don't hold back from saying things to each other. So the working relationship is something that I have to be careful about because I want to dog her. I'm like, hey, you didn't put enough time today, but I know she's going to get crabby. And this is her 1 week off, you know, like this is her, second week off from school?
Yeah.
And look, she worked hard, so she deserves a little time off, but at the same time, it's like you promise people chopsticks on a timeline, you gotta deliver. So I'm always trying to figure out, like, how much should I nudge her and remind her that we gotta do this versus how much do I let her take the lead, and I don't want us to get crispy at each other, because when we're doing well in the shop together, it's a value add, but if you push too much, it can be a value subtract.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Gets a little edgy sometimes.
Do I want to be a full-time woodworker? Absolutely not. I have found, for me, that when I spend 8 hours in the shop every day, I start to hate it. It's just too much for me. I'm at my best with a balanced lifestyle. That means some science, some family, some exercise, and some woodworking, and some downtime to like think about art or watch a show with my family. It's that balance that fuels everything. And when things go out of balance in one realm or the other, the whole thing starts to feel wrong. So I've never really considered going full-time into woodworking, which brings up an interesting point, because the word hobbyist, the H word, for too long has been sort of a dirty word. And that's a shame, because just because one is a hobbyist or doesn't earn an income at that thing doesn't mean you don't love it, and it doesn't mean you're not passionate about it, and it doesn't mean you can't be good at it and take it seriously. So I think there's a part of me that wants to see the term hobbyist sort of redefined. It doesn't have to be, oh, they're not serious because they're a hobbyist. In fact, being a hobbyist is a great thing, and the reason why is because it frees me up in the shop to do what I want to do and not worry about earning potential, which very much would push you quickly towards making certain things. Being a hobbyist affords you this ultimate flexibility to explore ideas, to make what you want, even if it might not sell. Now, I do take a lot of commissions, and I've been doing commissions for quite a number of years, but I'm able to work with my customers and to only take the projects where they want my creative input. I do not take projects where they dictate the design to me, and I do not take projects where I think it's just gonna sit on a shelf in a closet, because I don't care how much money you wag in my face, like my time is so valuable on this earth and it's so finite that I want to do projects where it moves the other person and it's part of their daily life and their legacy, you know, within their own family. So I'm very discriminating about the projects I take, and those projects allow me the right amount of creative input that I'm looking for into every piece I do. So what was important to me with having my daughter in the shop, number one, that she learns how to be safe and not chop off her digits. But, and Ruby's been in the shop since she was, what, like 7 or 8?
Yeah, long time.
But I feel like it was an opportunity to show her, like, what excellence is like when you try to make something. Like, where's the bar, right? And I felt like if I could, you know, show her, like, what excellence looks like in even something as simple as a chopstick, like, that would set the bar for her own life about, you know, what's a good job, what's good enough, you know, what's acceptable. And then, of course, work ethic, you know, what it takes to make $1. The reason I don't get on her about a job and whatnot is because she does such a great job in school. I consider, like, doing well in school and doing well in a sport her job. So she takes that very seriously, and then she joins me. I think this is a great time together. Like, we definitely enjoy spending time together in the shop, or I enjoy it.
Quality time.
But we spend a lot of time together otherwise, just not in the shop. Shop
It's
strangers.
only fun because we do it together, basically. Yeah, words from the heart.
Does being a scientist have interplay with being an artist or a woodworker? Once you get to actually building the project out of the design phase, from the creative design phase into the project execution, well, that actually does interplay much with your analytical mind, because you're thinking about materials. How much do I need? How do I put it together? How do I solve problems? All of that are, I'd say, muscles that are well developed from doing that every day in terms of a science project. What do we need? How do we accomplish it? What are some of the unexpected things we're going to have to overcome? So I'm pretty good at the execution piece, even though I much more prefer the design part. That the design is actually what lights me up. The execution, sometimes I'm actually like, oh shit, I have to go make this thing now. And I know that means 1 to 2 months of like buckling down and just doing what needs to be done, when really I want to design the next piece. I wish I had like a little elf in the shop sometimes who could make the pieces for me. Unfortunately, Dobby's a free elf, as we know, so it's not going to be Dobby helping me out. But yeah, I prefer the design, but the execution does play well to my scientific strengths. One of my favorite pieces is my Windsor settee. And I try to ask myself why, right? It's such a traditional form and I'm all into design and breaking new ground. There's just something so appealing about a handmade chair. It feels like home, to have really nice handmade furniture in your house. It just feels right. It feels like family. You want things that will be passed on as heirlooms. So I made this Windsor settee with my chair making mentor and one of my best friends, David Duyard, who was nice enough to take me on as a private student and build this bench together. So every time I sit in it and every time I see friends and family sitting in it, it just gives me a warm and fuzzy feeling. And makes me also think about David and our friendship. So one of the reasons I decided to try to learn how to make a chair is about that idea that I think we should be well versed in just about everything. We shouldn't pigeonhole ourselves into one realm of the woodworking universe, or I'm just a turner, or I'm a casemaker, or I'm a this. I feel like if we really want full design freedom, we have to have fluency in just about everything, which means you're gonna have to learn how to do wood turning. So of course, you learn to turn and you can turn the legs and you can turn these armrests, and you should learn to carve, for example. Try carving. So, carving is in these volutes here, and of course the knuckles on the hand holds. But I think chair making in general has a lot to teach all of us because nothing on it is flat or square or 90 degrees. And so it teaches you how do I deal with things that are not regular and have splay and rake, and how do I deal with that kind of uncertainty? And these lessons, I do believe, filter into the other things we make, and it's lessons for how to deal when you find yourself adrift in another project, how to deal with that. Lessons from this can be repurposed. So of course I wanted this for my house, but I also thought I'd be investing in my own skill sets by trying to make something like a chair. I still feel like I'm only just starting. I feel like I'm only 5% down the path, honestly, of where I want to be. Many of us, look at others and think, wow, they really have their shit together. They know who they are, they know what they're doing. Wow, that person's got it together. But I don't think any of us feel that way. I feel like a beginner most days. A lot of people will say, oh, Paul, how do you know how to do this? Or, using the word master at this. And none of that feels like it fits. To me, I feel like I'm a beginner to intermediate. I know that may sound weird considering I've been making things for 20 years, but it feels that way inside. I don't feel like I have the answers. All I know is, I made this thing and it worked out that time, but will it work out next time? You just never feel secure, really. And I think that's a good way to be. Every project, I have a moment of gosh, I hope I can pull this one off. And no matter how many times I pulled it off before that, I still have that little bit of self-doubt, and I think that's good. It keeps us on our toes. It keeps the process fresh. You're never cocky or too self-assured that, oh, I got this. I just never feel that way. And I like that sort of tension about expertise, but also staying curious and staying humble about where you are. So one of the things people say to me very routinely is, where do you find the time? And I say, nobody finds time. You either do it or you don't. And I've thought a lot about life and balance and mortality. It's one of my favorite topics, as I think a lot of people know. Life goes by very quickly for all of us. I don't think it's serious. I'm not sure what the purpose is. I think the purpose is whatever you decide your purpose is. So for me, my purpose in life, or one of them, is balance. Balance, being able to do good work as a scientist, to be a good family member with my family, and to make things that make people happy in the shop. That's sort of my goal, is to make objects that bring happiness to me and also to the people that receive them. So finding the time, you don't find the time, you either make it or you don't. And that means, you have to prioritize balance. That means you're not working to the exclusion of everything else. That means you're probably not going to watch a lot of TV or have a lot of, sort of electronic time. And so let's say I work all day and I have dinner with the family and then I come out to the shop. It's a commitment. It's actually a compulsion is actually what I would call it, because not coming in the shop feels bad. Sitting and not making and not feeling that excitement of creating art is actually a unpleasant event. So when I'm out of the shop for 3 or 4 days, I am itching like crazy to get back in here and take a step on something. So it's really not about finding the time. It's almost like a compulsion to come in here. And that, I consider myself very lucky that I have the lifestyle that allows me to do that. Oh, you want to talk about small shop space? Holy shit, this shop is so tight. Yeah, well, that's not an excuse. It does make it a bit difficult to make large-scale furniture, but look, I think too many people are busy setting up shops, making shop furniture, making sure every detail of the setup and the gear is correct before I start. That's actually a really bad pitfall. Preparers and perfectionism are the enemies. I say, pick a project, figure out what tools you need to execute that, and start. Don't worry about the shop, don't worry. This is by no means some trophy shop. It is congested, it is clogged, but it's perfect for me. Just start with what you have. Stop preparing and stop waiting for everything to be perfect before you start making something. It's like having children. Is there a good time to have a kid? No. You just do it or you don't do it. I have a lot of support from the people in my life to help me do this. It starts with my wife, who has never not supported me 100%. She doesn't complain about the shop time, even though sometimes it's excessive. She helps me with design problems when I get stuck. I said, this project is 80% there, but it needs that little something and I just can't come up with it. And she goes, what about this? And I'm like, God damn, that's such a great idea. Why didn't I think of that? That's so good. So actually, she's my secret weapon. She helps me design a lot, and she's so thoughtful and nice about allowing me to be who I am as part of a marriage, right? Because I don't know that we'd be so happily married if she didn't allow me to shop time, because this is part of who I am. It's part of who I need to be. So the support starts with her. Of course, my daughter as well tolerates her dad being in the shop a lot, and she, the Copper Piglet, sometimes joins me in here. Support from the woodworking world comes in the shape and form of friends, obviously. Two of the people who I hit up most often, I think you probably already know the answer. Keith Johnson and I talk all the time. We talk about our successes and we also talk about our failures. And when appropriate, we offer each other advice. And also Eric Curtis. Eric and I, we have a podcast together, so we're constantly talking about design. Woodworking is Bullshit, by the way, is the name of our podcast, where it's about design and inspiration and the philosophy of making. It's not about how to do it, it's about the why, which is a lot of what we talked about today. So Eric, Mary, and I, we formed this podcast to try and figure out our thoughts about design. And that actually is a huge source of support, because I can ask the two of them, hey, what do we do about this? Like, we'll take it on as a topic. Something I'm struggling with personally in the shop, we'll take it on as a topic. And it has helped me so much get my shit together mentally. And then, of course, Eric. Eric is one of the finest, well-rounded makers I know. I know you're familiar with his work on Netflix and as a content creator on YouTube, but Eric is so well versed in fine furniture and techniques ranging from rough carpentry all the way to the finest woodworking. I know if I get stuck, him or Keith is going to help me unstick myself. Most of the time I get stuck, it's not physical, it's not an execution problem, it's a design problem. That's probably where I need the most help. And also my collaborator Jen DiRenzo, she's great for helping me unstick my design brain. I think this piece shows the generosity of the woodworking community. This was made by my friend Dan Brown of Laughing Mantis Designs, who just happened to be in the Boston area, and we had become friends. He's also a cancer researcher, biologist like myself. And Dan said, hey, I'd love to stop by and say hi, because we'd been friends for a few years online. And when he came by, he gave me this family portrait that he did through Intarsia. So this is me. This is my daughter, the Copper Piglet. This is my wife, because we have chickens and she loves chickens. And this was our dog, Henry. So this is like, I just think this is such a beautiful example of the type of people that exist in this community. I just love it. And more recently, since we got Betty, since Henry died, Dan made Betty, which I have to add to the family portrait. Why should you work with your hands? Because you have to. It makes you feel complete. We evolved to gather resources, to procreate, and to survive. That was a very physical evolution. And to think that we're sitting all day inside on computers, look, all the signs are there that it's not really healthy to do just that to the exclusion of all else, right? It's bad for our back, our bodies hurt, we feel depressed, we feel cloudy-headed. We have to do things physically. So working with your hands and making things is such a catharsis. I love it. It just feels so good to make something, and you step back and you look at that thing and you get chills for a moment when something works out. And it's not, by the way, it's not just the finished product. Like, I don't think making with your hands is about the finished product. I think it's about the daily journey, because what percent of the time do you have a finished product versus what percent of the time are you making the product? It's like 99.9% the journey, 0.1% the destination. If you live for the destination, you're not going to last long. 1/1000th of your time is spent with the finished product. So you have to have a love of the process. Don't rush through it to get to the end point. What you want to do is think of each day, each step, every piece of process that you're working with your hands as a ritual. I'm coming out and I'm cutting dovetails today. Or today is the day where I glue up the box and cut off the lid. Whatever you happen to be doing, don't rush it, enjoy it. Think of each as a little mini challenge. I'm gonna do the best glue of today. It's gonna be perfectly square. I'm gonna have the right amount of glue so there's not a ton of squeeze out, and that thing's gonna look damn perfect when I cut the lid off tomorrow. Now that's also the luxury of being a hobbyist, is like some of your deadlines have a little more leeway than if you're surviving off them as a paycheck. But I really believe that if you are able to put your head in a place where you focus on the journey and the daily challenge as opposed to the destination, you will find you are much happier in the shop and you enjoy every day that you're doing this. I see woodworking as a lifelong passion. Same with science. People ask, when are you going to retire, Paul, and pursue your real passion, thinking that it's woodworking? I got news for you. My real passion is actually science. Woodworking is also my second passion. I love them both dearly, and I'm not looking forward to ending either one of them. I do not live to retire. I think that, is a mistake, or you're doing something that you don't like and you can't wait to get away from it. Whereas like, if you can define your work and your passion in terms of things you enjoy, you're not looking to get away from it. I'm not living to retire. In fact, the idea of retiring feels weird to me, because what am I gonna do? Shh, first time. What's up? I surprised even myself. Science is a way of life. Like, thinking like a scientist and doing science every day is sort of just a flow of life, as is the shop. The idea of not coming in here, it makes me very sad to think about that. And to think that I'll eventually age out to the point that I can't lift the boards and I might not be able to wrangle the large pieces of wood on the machines like I do now. That thought makes me very sad. So I don't anticipate giving it up voluntarily at any point. design in woodworking, it just isn't talked about enough. Everyone wants to talk about how to cut better dovetails, how to use the latest gadget or tool. No one is saying, hey, what about, did you see this design? What a clever conception that was, or what a cool, line or curve that is, or did you see the person who took inspiration from X and put it in their work? We don't have discussions around design like we do about tools and gadgets and gizmos and jigs. I wish we talked more about that. In fact, most of the messages I send to Eric or Keith or my friends or Jen are design posts. It's like showing them something I saw that I think is wicked design. And we think about, wow, can we somehow borrow a piece of that inspiration somehow in some, whether it's the line or the shape of the curve or the idea of like drawers being upside down or vertical or round, whatever the idea is. I wish we talked more about design instead of execution all the time. I'll just say this. I think at the heart of whatever we've touched on today, be it design or how do you find the time or where do you find your inspiration, at the heart of all of that is this, what I would say is curiosity. Curiosity keeps you coming to the shop. I want to see the next thing. I wonder how the next thing will turn out. Curiosity guides your search for inspiration. I wonder what that artist was thinking. I need to watch a documentary. I want to get inside their head. I want to see what they were thinking as a way to see, do I think like that? Is there something I could borrow about the way that person's thinking that could help me? Curiosity drives everything. Learning new techniques. You're curious about, how does that technique work? Could I somehow integrate that? So I really think allowing yourself to be curious about, in general, informs almost everything in the shop. It's a wellspring of ideas, and you never feel dried out if you have a constant source of curiosity about what you're making and where you're going to get your idea for the next thing.
So I think we've all been fed a line of bullshit because, if the average retirement age is 65 and most of us are not going to live much past 75 and maybe 80 if you're lucky, I have 25 years ahead of me? 25! You can fucking count 25 Christmases on your hand.